Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 55 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4. Today we're starting chapter 23, Maharaj Prithu's going back home. First of all, let us recite our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyatya Deshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha. Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Right. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, chapter 23, Maharaj Prithu's going back home. There are 39 verses in this chapter, and we've divided them into 4 sections. First section is from verse 1 to verse 12. Prithu Maharaj leaves home, like out of the palace into the forest type of situation, in order to go back home, back to Godhead in due course. And second section, verse 13 to verse 24, he gives up his body, means Prithu Maharaj, of course. Then, third section, verse 25 to verse 29, the demigods glorify Archi. Archi, of course, happens to be the wife of Maharaj Prithu and mother of their 5 sons. And fourth section, verse 30 to verse 39, and it's a very interesting section, actually. The benefits of hearing about King Prithu. So, yeah, you must tune into that, because I'm sure you'll find it really quite fascinating, and maybe in some ways you didn't expect also. Okay, so first section, verse 1 to verse 12, Prithu Maharaj leaves home. Let's read through the verses 1 to 3, first of all, together. At the last stage of his life, when Maharaj Prithu saw himself getting old, that great soul who was king of the world divided whatever opulence he had accumulated amongst all kinds of living entities, moving and non-moving. He arranged pensions for everyone according to religious principles, and after executing the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in complete coordination with him, he dedicated his sons unto the earth, which was considered to be his daughter. Then Maharaj Prithu left the presence of his citizens, who were almost lamenting and crying from feeling separation from the king, and he went to the forest alone with his wife to perform austerities. Right, verse 4. After retiring from family life, Maharaj Prithu strictly followed the regulations of retired life, means vanaprast, and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. 5. In the tapavan, Maharaj Prithu sometimes ate the trunks and roots of trees. And sometimes he ate fruit and dried leaves, and for some weeks he drank only water. Finally, he lived simply by breathing air. Verse 6, following the principles of forest living, and the footsteps of the great sages and munis, Prithu Maharaj accepted 5 kinds of heating processes during the summer season, exposed himself to torrents of rain in the rainy season, and in the winter stood in water up to his neck. He also used to simply lie down on the floor to sleep. 7. Maharaj Prithu underwent all these severe austerities in order to control his words and his senses, to refrain from discharging his semen, and to control the life air within his body. All this he did for the satisfaction of Krishna. He had no other purpose. Verse 8. By thus practicing severe austerities, Maharaj Prithu gradually became steadfast in spiritual life and completely free of all desires for fruitive activities. He also practiced breathing exercises to control his mind and senses, and by such control he became completely free from all desires for fruitive activity. Verse 9. Thus the best amongst human beings, Maharaj Prithu, followed that path of spiritual advancement which was advised by Sanat Kumar. That is to say, he worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Verse 10. Maharaj Prithu thus engaged completely in devotional service, executing the rules and regulations strictly according to principles 24 hours daily. Thus his love and devotion unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, developed and became unflinching and fixed. Verse 11. By regularly discharging devotional service, Prithu Maharaj became transcendental in mind and could therefore constantly think of the lotus feet of the Lord. Because of this, he became completely detached and attained perfect knowledge by which he could transcend all doubt. Thus he was freed from the clutches of false ego and the material conception of life. Verse 12. When he became completely free from the bodily conception of life, Maharaj Prithu realized Lord Krishna sitting in everyone's heart as the Paramatma. Being thus able to get all instructions from him, he gave up all other practices of yoga and jnana. He was not even interested in the perfection of the yoga and jnana systems, for he thoroughly realized that devotional service to Krishna is the ultimate goal of life, and that unless the yogis and jnanis become attracted to Krishna Katha, narrations about Krishna, their illusions concerning existence can never be dispelled. Okay, devotees, so back to verse 1, verses 1 to 3. And the section, of course, Prithu Maharaj leaves home from verse 1 to verse 12. Right, so verse 1 to 3, at the last stage of his life, when Maharaj Prithu saw himself getting old, that great soul who was king of the world divided whatever opulence he had accumulated amongst all kinds of living entities, moving and non-moving. He arranged pensions for everyone according to religious principles, and after executing the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in complete coordination with him, he dedicated his sons unto the earth, which was considered to be his daughter. Then Maharaj Prithu left the presence of his citizens, who were almost lamenting and crying from feeling separation from the king, and went to the forest alone, with his wife to perform austerities. Okay, so let's have a look at the purport here. The first paragraph of the purport actually is sort of, anyway, it mentions that Prithu Maharaj is a Shaktivesh incarnation. He came to execute the Lord's orders. And Prabhupada explains how in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says he's the proprietor of all the planets. He always wants to see that every living entity is happy, particularly doing their duties in the Varnashram. And as soon as there's some discrepancy in the execution of duties, then the Lord appears himself. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. So we continue on into the second paragraph. And Prabhupada makes the point that, of course, there were so many discrepancies when Prithu's father, sort of so-called father, if you'd really call him that, Vena, was living. It was just a terrible situation. And that's how Maharaj Prithu ended up coming here. He was sent by Lord Vishnu to settle things and sort things out and deal with Vena. And now that's all been done, and he's put everything right. And actually the situation in the kingdom means on the planet is just absolutely wonderful. So now it's time to retire. As he was exemplary as a king, he can be exemplary as a vanaprastha in retirement. So he divided all the property up amongst his sons, appointed them to rule, went to the forest with his wife. Of course, we noted, well, I hope you noted that the Bhagavatam itself said that he went to the forest alone. But then it said he went with his wife. And we might become confused that is it a mistake? Because if you go alone, but actually you go with someone else, you're not going alone. So the thing is, according to Vedic standards, the husband and wife are considered one unit. Two halves of sort of a super being, you could say. So therefore, it's not incorrect. It's not, it's not chauvinistic, if you know what I mean, to say you're going alone, although actually you're going with your wife. It's quite appropriate, in fact, because husband and wife are one unit. So therefore, when you retire, you take your wife, and you can just say, yeah, I'm going alone, and it's fine. So therefore, as they've worked together as grihastas, now they can work together as vanaprasthas. Prabhupada says, combinedly do austerities for liberation. Right. So Prithu did this. And that's the Vedic way. Didn't stay home till he just dropped dead sometime. It's Vedic. It's the Vedic way to separate from the family, at least in, you could say, later middle age, and prepare to go back to Godhead without distraction. And of course, the point comes up that he wanted to go back to Godhead. So he executed these different programs of austerities and whatnot with his wife in order to go back to Godhead. But of course, the point is He's a Shakshavesh avatar. He's a form of the Supreme Lord. Not exactly full Vishnu Tattva, but he's way up there somewhere compared to us. So there's no question. He had come from Vaikuntha. Of course he's going back to Vaikuntha. But still, to set an example, he underwent austerities in the Tapovan. And Prabhupada makes the point that it appears that at that time there were many Tapovans. Tapovan, tapa means austerity, van means forest. There were many forests which were meant for retirement and the performance of austerities, spiritual development before the conclusion of one's life with a view to going back to Godhead. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, indeed it was compulsory for everyone to go to the Tapovan to fully accept the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For it is very difficult to retire from family life and at the same time remain at home. Yeah, I know many parents who have done that. They retired from work, they worked many years and they retired. And then what did they do? Most of the time, well, so much of the time, they sat in front of television and watched the Muppets. My mother, actually, when my father retired, she complained to me when I visited one time. I would usually go every year for 4 or 5 days. One time she complained to me, your father, you got to speak to your father. She said, all he does is he sits in front of TV and watches the Muppets, which if you haven't heard of them, it's probably good. It's just a stupid children's sort of cartoony type of thing. Okay, on we go. Verse 4. After retiring from family life, Maharaj Prithu strictly followed the regulations of retired life and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. Right, well, that's very nice, isn't it? He underwent severe austerities in the forest with his wife together, basically. I mean, they're a team. They're two parts of one person in a sense. And he did it very seriously. Not that he said that, well, I am avatar of the Supreme Lord, so I'm okay. Thank you. I don't need to do austerity. You do austerity. No, he did it. He really took it seriously, trying to prepare for the end of the life of his material body. Prepare himself for going back to Godhead, even though obviously he's going back to Godhead, where he came from. So Prabhupada makes a very nice point at the beginning of the purport, very good point. As it's necessary to be very active in family life, similarly after retirement, one has to control the mind and the senses. You've really got to engage very seriously in your retired life, doing austerities. In family life, you're not really doing austerities exactly, but you're chanting, but you've got to look after your family. That's pretty austere. But now he's left home. There's no question of having to look after his family. So, therefore, he just actively engaged in, Prabhupada says, controlling the mind and senses, or in other words, doing austerities and penances. So this is possible when you're fully engaged in devotional service. And preparing to go back to Godhead, which is the whole purpose of the Vedic process. Of course, Grihastha ashram is a sort of what does Prabhupada say, a concession, where you have a combination of some sense gratification with some regulated devotional service. So the whole idea there is to help a person to retire in middle age, like 50 years, middle age, and then engage fully in austerities for transcending sense gratification once and for all. So, therefore, in Vanaprastha life, tapasya, austerity, is strongly recommended. So, Prithu Maharaj, he exactly followed all the rules of Vanaprastha life, which is technically known as Vaikhanasa ashram. So Prabhupada makes the point that the word Vaikhanasa susamate is significant, because in Vanaprastha life, the regulative principles also have to be strictly followed, of course. So in other words, we can see Dhruva Maharaj was just ideal. Prithu Maharaj was ideal in every sphere of life. And Prabhupada quotes part of a verse. It's from Mahabharata, but it's spoken by Lord Chaitanya in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Mahajano yena gata sapanta. One should follow in the footsteps of great persons. Yeah, so by following the exemplary character of Prithu Maharaj, you can become perfect in all respects while living this life, or while retiring from active life. So then after you leave your physical body, you can become liberated, go back to Godhead, ecstatic. Okay, so on we go to verse 5. In the Tapavan, Maharaj Prithu sometimes ate the trunks and roots of trees, and sometimes he ate fruit and dried leaves, and for some weeks he drank only water. Finally, he lived simply by breathing air, Maharaj Prithu. So in other words, well, you can see Dhruva Maharaj here, can't you? Yes, of course, it's just, in principle at least, it's exactly the same sort of program. Maybe or maybe not, but it may be not quite as dramatic as Dhruva Maharaj's program, but same idea, same principle. So, okay, let's have a look at the purport. Let me just mention, Mahajano Yanikata Sapanta. This is from a Mahabharata verse. Lord Chaitanya speaks it in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it's a very important verse, line, or it's a very important verse. It begins by saying, the idea is how are you going to find out what's the absolute truth? And it begins by saying, well, there are so many sages, and in many cases their ideas are different from each other. So that's not the way to find out what's the absolute truth, because there's so many contradictory ideas amongst those people. And what about then the scriptures, for example? What about the scriptures? Well, the fact is, there are so many different scriptures. For example, there's the Karmakandya section of the Vedas. It's all about fruit of activities, demigod worship, to go to heavenly planets. That's not what we're looking for. And then there's like the Upanishads. They are, at least many of them, it's so easy to see them as being impersonal. So therefore, even just Shastra in general, you got to be careful. Otherwise, you can easily get misled. So then the last line is, so how are you going to understand the truth? Mahajano yena gata sapanta. You got to follow in the footsteps of the Mahajans. And there are 12 Mahajans. I mean, they're an official group, you can say. They're 12 authorities on devotional service. So if you follow them, then you can understand what is the goal of life and how to achieve it. Right. Okay, so let's go back onto verse 5. Let me read the translation again. In the Tapavan, Maharaj Prithu sometimes ate the trunks and roots of trees, and sometimes he ate fruit and dried leaves, and for some weeks he drank only water. Finally, he lived simply by breathing air. So, we remember, Dhruva Maharaj. So there's interesting purport here, not so long, but it's interesting. In Bhagavad Gita, at least in one part or some parts of Bhagavad Gita, yogis are advised to go to secluded places in the forest, live alone in some sanctified place there. But we can understand that when Prithu Maharaj went to the forest, he didn't go to some place like that where they had nice prasadam a couple of times a day or something. He didn't eat cooked food sent from home, or some cooked food cooked by disciples who were just nearby watching out for him. No. As soon as you take the vow to live in the forest, you must simply eat roots, tree trunks, fruits, dried leaves, or whatever nature provides in that way. And Prithu Maharaj strictly adopted these principles. Sometimes he ate only dried leaves, sometimes he just drank a little water. And finally, he lived on air alone. Krishna. Anyway, Prabhupada makes an important point. I mean, obviously, Prithu Maharaj is not overeating. So Prabhupada says that overeating is not recommended for one who wants to progress in spiritual life. And Srila Rupa Goswami warns against this, and also making too much endeavor, even in spiritual life. These are against the principles for advancing in spiritual life. So on to the second paragraph, Prabhupada makes the point that it's notable that according to the Vedic injunctions, if you live in the forest, you're in complete goodness. If you live in the city, you're in passion. If you live in some brothel or drinking house, you're in ignorance. But to live in the temple is to live in Vaikuntha, transcendental to all the modes. So this Krishna consciousness movement gives the opportunity to live in the temple of the Lord, right? Which is as good as Vaikuntha. So therefore, even though Vedic injunctions talk about living in the forest and so on and so forth, Krishna conscious person nowadays doesn't need to go to the forest and artificially imitate Prithu Maharaj or other great sages. Okay. Third paragraph. So Rupa Goswami, after retiring, went and lived under a tree in Vrindavan. Same program as Prithu Maharaj. And since then, many people have imitated this, but instead of becoming more advanced spiritually, many of them have found themselves just get caught up. Even in Vrindavan, sometimes illicit sex, gambling, intoxication. So, okay, this Krishna consciousness movement has been introduced in the West, but it's not possible for Westerners to go and live in the forest and do austerities like Prithu or Srila Rupa Goswami. So, but Westerners can follow in the footsteps of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati by living in a temple which is transcendental and vowing to eat only Krishna prasadam, following the regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds. In this way, one's spiritual life will never be disturbed. Verse 6. Following the principles of forest living and the footsteps of the great sages and munis, Prithu Maharaj accepted 5 kinds of heating processes during the summer season, exposed himself to torrents of rain in the rainy season, and in the water, stood in water up to his neck. He also used to simply lie down on the floor to sleep. So right, in the purport here, Prabhupada says, these austerities, like what we just read, they're done by jnanis and yogis, the ones who can't accept bhakti yoga. They need such severe austerities, otherwise they won't be able to make any progress. So Panchatapa refers to 5 kinds of heating processes, which means you're sitting in a circle of fire with flames from 4 sides and the sun above, and that's there. And unlike me, you don't have sunburn cream on and a nice sun hat. In the rainy season, you sit in the rain, and in the winter, you sit in cold water or stand up to the neck the whole day, not for a couple of minutes or something like that. And in regard to bedding, the ascetic should just lie on the floor, nothing needed. Okay, Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the purpose for undergoing such severe austerities is to become a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as explained in the next verse. Verse 7, Maharaj Prithu underwent all these severe austerities in order to control his words and his senses, to refrain from discharging his semen, and to control the life air within his body. All this he did for the satisfaction of Krishna. He had no other purpose. So, okay, let's have a look at the purport here. And, substantial purport. So, in Kali Yuga, it said, Harir Nam, Harir Nam, Harir Nam Eva Kevalam. Kalo Nasyeva, 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 Gatir Anyata. That in this age of Kali, the only process is to chant the holy names of the Lord. Yeah. So in order to be recognized by Krishna, you should chant 24 hours a day. Unfortunately, people can't do this. They would rather do some pseudo meditation Prabhupada would say, press the nose, which is just meaningless, without doing the other austerities. So the fact is, Prabhupada says, the fact is, either you do the severe austerities, or you take to devotional service. And Krishna conscious person is the most intelligent, because in Kali Yuga, it's not possible to do these severe austerities. And the Krishna conscious persons or people, they know that. So they become engaged in devotional service. So we have to follow great persons like Lord Chaitanya, who spoke Shikshastakam. Yes, beautiful, 8 beautiful verses. And we should try to memorize these 8 verses, actually. So Shikshastakam begins with, all glories to Sri Krishna Sankirtana. From the beginning will purify and liberate you. So, but the thing is, if you think about it, if the real purpose of all yoga is to please Krishna, then the simple system of bhakti yoga is sufficient. But the thing is, you have to be constantly engaged in service, constantly. So, although Prithu Maharaj did his austerities long time before Lord Krishna's appearance, but his purpose was to please Krishna, he knew about Krishna. So Prabhupada makes the point in the second paragraph, there are many fools who say worship of Krishna began 5,000 years ago. So worship of Krishna began only after his appearance. But this is not a fact. Here's Prithu Maharaj, this is Satya Yuga. This is the beginning of this whole lifetime of Brahma. And here we see Prithu Maharaj worshipped Krishna millions of years ago. Yeah, as a descendant of Dhruva Maharaj. So the point is, Krishna worship has existed since, at the beginning of creation, and has continued through all the yugas, including now in Kali Yuga. So as Bhagavad Gita says, Krishna appears not only now, but in every millennium. So all these things are going on in every millennium. So the idea that worship of Krishna only began 5,000 years ago is not substantiated by the Vedic literatures. So, okay, third paragraph. So also of significance in this verse are the words, Ariradayeshu Krishnam Acharat Tapa Uttamam. Prithu Maharaj did severe austerity specifically to worship Krishna, but Krishna is so kind, especially now that he appears in his holy names. Right, so Prabhupada quotes Narada Pancharatra, Aradito yadi haris tapasa kim. If Krishna is to be worshipped, there's no need to do severe austerities. As some of us may have as one has already reached the destination. And of course, if after doing great tapasya, you cannot reach Krishna, then all your tapasya is just a waste of time. Shrama eva hi kevalam. And this, let me just translate this little line here, Shrama eva hi kevalam. Excuse me, Shrama means waste of time. Eva means certainly. He means definitely. Kevalam means only. That's pretty emphatic, isn't it? If after whatever program you've done, you cannot reach Krishna, then it's all been a waste of time, simply completely hopeless. So anyway, so we don't need to be discouraged if it's difficult for us to go to the forest for severe austerities. Don't worry. Stay home, just keep chanting. Life is so short. We have to strictly adhere to the principles from the acharyas and peacefully practice Krishna consciousness. And this is very nice. Narottam Das Thakur says, Ananda Balahari Bhaja Vrindavan Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majayaman. For blissful life, chant Hare Krishna, come to Vrindavan, serve the spiritual master and Vaishnavas. So this Krishna consciousness movement is very easy and safe. Just execute the orders of the Lord, just surrender to the Lord. And that's all you need to do. Preach Krishna consciousness and follow the path of the Vaishnavas. So last point Prabhupada makes is that the spiritual master represents both Lord Krishna and the Vaishnavas. So by following his instructions and chanting Hare Krishna, everything will be all right. Hare Krishna. Okay, on to verse 8. By thus practicing severe austerities, Maharaj Prithu gradually became steadfast in devotional life and completely free of all desires for fruitive activities. He also practiced breathing exercises to control his mind and senses, and by such control, he became completely free from all desires for fruitive activity. So, there's a substantial purport here, 4 paragraphs actually, it's pretty on the longer side. So Prabhupada begins by saying that in this verse the word pranayamai is very important. Because pranayamai is very important in this verse because the Hatha yogis and Ashtanga yogis practice pranayama. But generally they don't know the purpose behind it. So the purposes of pranayama or mystic yoga is to stop the mind and senses from engaging in fruitive activities. And of course, you get many yogis in the West who are really into yoga. And some of them are just extremely into it, and that's how they live. But they don't have any idea of this point. That the purpose of pranayama is not just to have good exercise or something like that. The purpose is to stop engagement in fruitive activity and therefore engage in service to Krishna. Very important, we should note that. So actually in the previous verse it said, whatever austerity, pranayama and mystic yoga practices Prithu Maharaj did, they were for worshipping Krishna. So therefore he's a perfect example for yogis also. Whatever he did was to please Krishna. So on we go, second paragraph. The minds of those addicted to fruitive activities, they're always filled with unclean desires. These fruitive activities are symptomatic of our polluted desire to dominate material nature. And if we continue to be subject to the polluted desires, we have to take one material body after another. So therefore, pranayam, these types of activities are not for keeping the body fit, as we sometimes read. So those yogis and so-called yogis, they're doing fruitive activities, they're bound up by material desires, they'll take another body. So therefore, to save such yogis from just wandering through different species, Shastra warns that such yogic practice is a waste of time. Yeah. The only means for elevation is to practice Hare Krishna. So this third paragraph here, let's have a look at it. Prita's activities were in Satya Yuga. So now this practice of yoga is misunderstood by fallen people who are not capable of practicing anything, really. So now, Kalo Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva. In the age of Kali, there's no other way than chanting the holy names of the Lord. So the conclusion is that unless the karmis, gyanis, and yogis actually take to devotional service, their so-called yoga and austerities, have no value. So, Naradita appears here. If Hari is not worshipped, there's no point in doing meditational yoga, karma yoga, or culturing Vedic knowledge. So as far as pranayama is concerned, chanting the holy name and dancing in ecstasy is also pranayama. And previously, Sanat Kumar instructed Maharaj Prithu, just constantly do devotional service. And Prabhupada, to really drive that point home, referred to Bhagavad Gita, 4th Canto, chapter 22, verse 39. We just chanted it. That was the previous chapter, which means, it means only by worshipping Vasudeva can one become free from the desires of fruitive activities. Outside of worshipping Vasudeva, the yogis and jnanis cannot attain freedom from such desires. And 4th paragraph. Here the word pranayam doesn't refer to any ulterior motive. That's interesting. The actual aim is to strengthen the mind and senses in order to engage them in devotional service. Now, in the present age, this determination can easily be acquired simply by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Verse 9. Thus the best amongst human beings, Maharaj Prithu, followed that path of spiritual advancement which was advised by Sanat Kumar. That is to say, he worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So here it's clearly said, Prithu Maharaj, practicing pranayama yoga system, engaged in service to the Lord, as advised by Sanat Kumar. So the words Purusham Abhajat Purusharshaba are significant. Purusharshaba refers to Maharaj Prithu, the best among human beings. And Purusham refers to Maharaj Prithu, the best among human beings. Purusharshaba refers to Maharaj Prithu, the best among human beings. And Purusham refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the conclusion is that the best man among all men engages in service to the Lord. So in that sense, one Purusha is worshipable, and the other Purusha is the worshipper. That's interesting. That's nice, isn't it? So when the worshipping Purusha, the living entity, thinks of becoming one with the Supreme Person, he becomes bewildered and falls into the darkness of ignorance. So as Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 2:12, all the living entities assembled on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, as well as himself, were present in the past as individuals, and they'll continue to be present in future as individuals. Therefore, the two Purushas never lose their identities. One who is self-realized serves the Lord perpetually in this life and the next. Actually, for devotees, there's no difference between this life and the next. Prabhupada says, in this life, the neophyte is trained to serve the Lord. In the next life, he trains him in Vaikuntha. So even for a neophyte, devotional service is never considered material, since even the neophyte is acting on the Brahma-bhuta stage. The devotee is already liberated. So therefore he doesn't have to practice any other yoga to approach the Brahma-bhuta stage. If he follows strictly the orders of the spiritual master, follows the rules and regulations, and chants Hare Krishna, it should be concluded he's already on the Brahma-bhuta stage. And this, of course, this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 14, verse 26. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who's engaged in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So on to verse 10. Maharaj Prithu thus engaged completely in devotional service, executing the rules and regulations strictly according to principles, 24 hours daily. Thus his love and devotion unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna developed and became unflinching and fixed. Well, that's nice, isn't it? So, first paragraph of purport. The word Bhagavad Dharmina indicates that the religious process Prithu Maharaj practiced is beyond all pretensions. And we note, Bhagavatam 112 states that pretentious religious principles are nothing but cheating. Dharma projatakaitavocha paramo nimatsaranam sutam. Yeah. This Srimad Bhagavatam begins by completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. Yeah. So, there's a couple of other quotes about it, but mainly Srila Rupa Goswami says to Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila chapter 19 verse 167, taken actually from, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, but it appears in Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Yabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Janavritam Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Utama. Translation: when one who is not inspired by material desires and is not contaminated by the processes of fruitive activity and empiric speculation fully engages in the favorable service of the Lord, so when this happens, His service is called Bhagavad Dharma, or pure devotional service. The word Brahmani doesn't refer to impersonal Brahman in the verse, but it's a subordinate feature of the Lord. Since the worshippers of impersonal Brahman want to merge into the Brahman, then they cannot be considered followers of Bhagavad Dharma. Yes. These other verses above, the paragraph above, Bhagavad Dharmina, etc., they are spelling this out. So they can't be considered followers of Bhagavad Dharma if they're worshippers of the impersonal Brahman and their goal is to merge into the Brahman effulgence. So the thing is, after failing in his material enjoyment, the impersonalist may want to merge, but the pure devotee has no such desire. So therefore the pure devotee is the real Bhagavad Dharmi, the real person who's practicing Bhagavad Dharma. So third paragraph, and we'll conclude after this. So it's clear from this verse, Maharaj Prithu was never a worshipper of the impersonal Brahman. He was only simply a pure devotee of the Lord. So Bhagavati Brahmani refers to one engaged in devotional service to the Lord. Well, the devotee's knowledge of the impersonal Brahman is automatically revealed, and he's not interested in the impersonal Brahman. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Maharaj Prithu's activities in devotional service enabled him to become fixed and steady in the discharge of devotional activities without having to take recourse to karma jnana or yoga. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.